Few, if any, cruisers have as much gear in their galley as they did in their kitchen on land. So, what do you do if a recipe calls for a type of galley gear you just don't have available? And will swapping out equipment really result in poor results? Hi there, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley podcast, I'll share some ideas for versatility in the galley, or as I call it, everything has to have two or more purposes. Before we start, though, let's talk about galley duty in general. Are you feeling a little overwhelmed by provisioning, meal planning, food storage? Nika and I have a couple of resources for you based on our years of cruising. First is Nika's Provisioning, Meal Planning, and Food Storage course. It'll give you a step-by-step plan that is honestly easy to follow. You're going to have no problems with this stuff once you listen to her. And if your particular frustration is that tiny refrigerator, grab a copy of my course, Eating Well with a Tiny Fridge. I'll teach you both how to store a lot of stuff outside the refrigerator and how to make the best possible use of the space you do have in the refrigerator. Seriously, I can go 3 weeks without stopping for provisions. Of course, also, we've got the Boat Galley Cookbook. We've put links to all of them in the show notes, and we're offering 10% off of them with the coupon code PODCAST. Let's talk about making do in the galley. A lot of cooking on a boat is really making do with what you have. For example, I've never seen a brownie recipe that called for baking the brownies in a pie pan. But why not? I mean, my recipe that I was following called for an 8x8 pan, but I didn't have one. The closest thing I had was either a pie pan or part of my nesting magma set. But I was planning to use the magma one for another dish, so I didn't want to use it. I used the pie pan. The brownies turned out just fine. Absolutely nobody complained about them. They were thrilled to have brownies. One thing I learned long ago on the boat was that less is better. And so, before rushing out to buy another pan or piece of galley equipment, the first question I always ask is whether I can get by with what I already have. Galley space is very, very precious, and I want to use it wisely. Now, a few bits of making do that I've learned over the years. Let me give you a few tips here. First of all, you don't need a wok on board. Anything that calls for a wok can be made in a skillet. Next, a bread pan. You don't need a bread pan. You can bake bread in anything that can go in the oven. Casserole, Pyrex bowl, a cake pan, a cookie sheet, even on a piece of just aluminum foil. You don't need a cookie sheet or pizza pan either. Just turn a cake pan upside down or use a piece of aluminum foil. Bread machine, if you've got the room, sure, it's great. But you know what? It's not hard to make bread by hand. You'll see a note in the show notes for my method called Yeast Bread Making 101. It's easy, it's fast, and it's pretty well foolproof. There's photos there of every step of the way. I also don't have any cooling racks. If the stove is not on, you can set things on a burner so that there will flow underneath. Otherwise, place a pair of table knives on hot pads on the counter. Set the hot pad on top of those knives. If you have a fan in the galley, move it so it blows on the food. That really helps cool things down faster. You can also get a silicone trivet that allows air to circulate under the pan. And it'll serve 2 or more purposes because it's going to be your hot pan as well as allowing things to cool off well. Silicone also makes it non-slip, so it keeps your pan on the counter just a little bit better, and hopefully it'll keep it off the floor. An electric mixer, I mix an awful lot of stuff by hand, but when I really do want an electric mixer, well, I have one beater, and I just stick it into the drill chuck for our electric drill that we have on the boat, and I use that. Works really, really well. In fact, just this past week, I showed some pictures of it on Instagram. You can take a quick look there. Garlic press, again, this is something you don't need. Use a knife, smash the clove of garlic, pull the paper off, finely mince the garlic. and it'll do beautifully. You can change pans also for most baked goods. In the show notes, there's a link to a whole article about changing the baking time and temperatures when you change the size of a pan. Over time, you get pretty good at doing that. And the funny thing is, with almost all of these, I don't miss having the real tool on the boat. It's just as easy to use the alternate, and the end result is every bit as good. Okay, that's it for this episode of the Boat Galley podcast. Hope you learned something. Hope you cut down a little bit on what you have in your galley. Please be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And please tell your friends about us too. Boat Galley is all about making your cruising life better and easier. Take care.